and welcome to this collaborative project brought to you by Vectric and our friends over at Axiom Precision. Now, the barbecue season is well and truly underway, so we thought it would be a great idea to provide you with a free project that would make the perfect addition to any barbecue. So let's head straight into the software and we'll take a look at that file. Okay, so we're going to use VCarve Pro version 11 for this project. Now, before we get started on our session, let's just take a look at a sketch that I've done so we can get a good idea of the parts that we need to create. And so here is a sketch where I thought I'd just show Austin how the part should come together. So let's just talk about this and some of the important things that we need to be aware of. So we have these ends, okay, so we've got one end here, we've got another end at the back, and these two parts basically help hold everything in place. In terms of the measurements, we're going with 8 inches wide. We're also going to go with it being about 12 inches high, and then the length of it is going to be 15 inches. That way we get a lot of space for your napkins, cutlery, sauces, bottles, that sort of thing. So it's one of those bulky things that you could bring outside, hopefully contain everything in so you're not going in and out. Okay, so looking at the end piece here, we'll just take a look at this panel, and it's just going to look something like this. So it's going to have this sort of shape. We're going to look at having an inlay here where we're going to put the word barbecue on. We're going to cut that out of masonite. So the masonite is going to provide us with a really nice contrast because the rest of the caddy is going to be made up of some plywood. So we're going to have a nice contrast there with the inlay against the plywood. And then we have various slots here to enable us to slot in the actual main length parts of the caddy. So looking at the lengths here, so we've got a base and we've got a top panel as well. So the base would look something like this. Okay, so it's just a piece of material that we cut out. It's got some tracks here, so here is where we can then put in or slot in the side panels, and we can also slot in a divider so everything isn't rolling around. We're just kind of creating these compartments or these areas for you to keep all your bits and pieces in place. Okay, so the top part, which is this portion here, that's going to have two kind of slots here where we can then put in bottles, napkins, whatever it is you want to put in there. And this is also just going to help keep that all the parts that you're putting in kind of sturdy so they're not just rolling around. And so the idea is that we have these tabs that stick out and they're going to slot through these holes that we've got here, and then we just peg them in place for extra rigidity, just to make it sturdy, and that's pretty much it. The side panels gives us room for us to customize this, so you could put someone's name on it. And this really kind of just makes it more of a customizable project where you can give it to someone as a gift, or if someone's hosting a barbecue, that sort of thing really. And then we also have room if you wanted to have a bottle top opener, and you can get one of those separately where you can just simply screw them in. So I've included enough room for kind of standard size bottle openers, so that's available for you to have the space to do that as well. So this whole project is pretty much a slot together part. We're going to be looking at different materials, so we are going to be using masonite to do the inlay on the end panels. We're also going to be looking at using thinner material for the actual side panels as well, and the divider, just so it's not so bulky in the central areas, but we want a thicker material for everything else, just to ensure that this is a sturdy piece. Okay, so that's pretty much everything there in terms of the parts. So hopefully it gives you a bit of a good idea as to what we'll be drawing up in the software. So let's just go back and jump into the software here. So to start with, we're going to create a new file. So working with a single-sided job, We're going to specify a width here of 48 inches and a height of 36 inches and a material thickness here of 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to set the Z0 position on top of our material, XY in the lower left. Resolution doesn't matter here as we're not working with 3D parts, so we're just going to go ahead here and press OK. Okay then, so we're going to start by creating some of the shape. So we're going to work in this kind of layout mode, and then once we've got all of our parts together, we can start thinking about what sheets they need to go onto. So we're going to start by creating the end panel. And throughout this demonstration, we'll be going in and out and speeding up and slowing down on particular areas where we can talk a little bit more about particular features or reasons as to why we've done that. But otherwise, it's a fairly simple part to draw up. You just need to know what needs to go where and be mindful of your material thicknesses as well. So we'll kind of come to those as we get to them. So for now, we're just going to create the end panel. So to start, let's use the polyline tool. So I'm just going to snap to the centre of our job. And we're just going to come down by 6 inches. So I'm making use of the smart snap in here just to tell me how long my line is. So we're going to go 8 wide. And we want to go back up to around 6. And then we want to create this kind of curved shape. So we can kind of do this, try and snap to the centre over here. So if we get the centre line there, and we can bring that up. Okay, so something like that. Maybe the best way to do this would be if we actually undid that. So in version 11 now, we can use the backspace key to kind of undo any movements that we've already made or any positions we've made. So we're actually just going to take that straight up, and we'll take that up by about something like that, so about 7 inches high, and we'll just click that in place. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to take that back over to the right as well, and then just snap that in place. And then we can right click, and then what we can do now is we can create the curvature that we need to create the shape. There's some nice smooth tops here for the actual end panel. So to do that, let's just go into node edit mode, and then what we can do is we can just smooth this node here, and then we can take these nodes here, all the handles, and then I'm just going to press H on the keyboard to bring up that horizontal line, and then that way when I move one of these, they just both move. So rather than saying one, it's actually I'm just using the arrow keys to do this, and you can see that as I'm moving it, they're moving in parallel to each other as if we've got this mirror line. Okay, so that's okay. So I want to just take these handles now, so I'm holding down shift to select them both, and I want to just make that a little bit wider, so it's something that looks like this. Then we can just click out, and that doesn't look too bad. Okay, so now we'll put in the barbecue text. So we're going to go into the draw text tool. Okay, so we're just going to position our text here. We're going to go with a font of Jill Sans Ultra Bold. We'll go around text height of 2 inches, and we're just going to input here barbecue like so. And we can close out, and then we can just position that somewhere around the centre there, just to ensure that we're aligning that up centrally. We can just align that to the centre like so, in which case we can then just shift that down to take a look at that. Okay, so that's not too bad. We'll just kind of leave that in a position something like that. Okay, so now I want to give a little bit of detail here. So we're going to go for a decorative motif. Now I've created some vectors prior to this of a crown, so let's just bring those in. So we'll go to File, and we'll go to Import, and we'll import some vectors, and then the project folder you've got the crown.dxf, and we can open that up. Okay, so here is my crown. You can see it's on a layer called crown. You can also see that we've imported in an empty layer as well. now. So the real nice thing about the software now is, especially if you had multiple layers, we actually have the option here to delete empty layers, and it will just delete all of the empty layers in the list, which can be quite typical when working with imported vector details. So we're just going to position that somewhere like here. Okay, so that's not too bad. So we've got a decorative crown motif, so we've got the barbecue king. So next up, let's go ahead and create a side panel. So we're just going to use the draw rectangle tool in this case. We'll go the width of 15 and a height of 4, and then we'll just go ahead and just create it by clicking in position here. Okay, so we're just going to move that somewhere over there. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take advantage of this space. So this space is perfect to add in any form of personalization. So we could put in somebody's name, we could put in a slogan, you could put your own name in if you're doing it for yourself. You could put some more decoration in there, whatever it is. It's a nice big space for us to use, for us to V-carve. And as we are V-carving into plywood, then, you know, we might get some of those layers come through just to add a little bit more decoration. So in this case, I'm actually going to put in a slogan. So we're going to go over to the draw text tool. Okay, so here I just want to position my text box. And then what we could do is we could just look at altering the font here. So we'll go with a font of, we'll just find the B. So we'll press B on the keyboard. And we're looking for Barlow. So Barlow Condensed is the font that I like. And then we can simply go in there and type in whatever the text is. So in this case, I'm going to go with King of the Grill. Okay, perfect. And you'll notice here, the software's kindly telling me that this is the wrong spelling. And so we can use the spell checker, in which case we can locate the correct words there. And you can see it's done that, which is super handy. I might look at just reducing the font height here to 1.5 so it fits in our space there. Then we can simply close out. Just going to hold down Shift to select the rectangle, and then we'll just go ahead and we'll align it to the center there. Okay, so we've got the King of the Grill in place. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead now to this stage of the design. So everything else that has been created here has all been drawn up using the rectangle tool. And we're just going to talk about now how everything comes together, what the dimensions mean and what it means to you and that sort of thing before we start assigning our vectors to specific sheets according to the materials that we're going to cut them out of. So pretty much all of the caddy parts that you can see here, bar the side panel, is going to be machined out of a material that is 3/8 of an inch thick. So we're going to be using the Baltic birch plywood to machine all of these parts. So when working with slot together projects, the thickness of the material is very crucial in terms of the slots that we use to slot parts into one another. So let's just take a look at the side panel, for instance, or the end panel even. Okay, so here you can see I've got a rectangle here that is 1 inch wide by 3/8 of an inch high. So 3/8 of an inch is that material thickness. And so if you was to machine this, this is something that you would need to change yourself. And we'll talk about the different parts that you need to change later on in this video. But for now, if we're just assuming that this is the material we are using, we'll just go ahead and talk about the rest of the parts. Okay, so you can see that this is 1 inch wide. Now you'll notice that we've got this handle here. Okay, so this is 1 inch high, and that is going to slot in to the end pieces of our caddy, and that's going to act as a handle. You'll notice that we have these little squares. Okay, so these squares, we're going to cut these out, and they are 3/8 by 3/8 inch. Okay, and so that's the material thickness by the material thickness. So we've got a nice square there. And the idea is we're going to create a peg. So over here, I've got this vector, and all I did was I created a rectangle, but then this one node that we've got over here, I just extended that outwards. Then I ensured that the halfway point, which is here, is 3/8 wide, so that the halfway point it should start to feel some tension as that pushes through the slot, where this portion of the wedge gets larger, and so that shouldn't really go through. So that's just going to lock that into place. Okay, so looking at these two pieces that we've got here, so this one represents the base, this one represents the upper portion that's going to line up in this level here, where we've got a hole cut out here and we've got one here, and this is where we can slot in our bottles, sauces, napkins, that sort of thing, and hopefully it just kind of keeps it all stood upright. So how does this work then? So if we just zoom in a little, okay, so we've got this base shape, okay, so the overall base itself is going to be 15 by 8, okay, so that's just a rectangle that I've drew out. And then we're going to have the side panel, so this rectangle here represents the side panel, which is this one here or this one here. And the idea is we're going to take this shape, but this shape is going to be extended into this area here, so it slots through. So imagine this, all the vectors that we can see here, as if we're looking down on the piece. It's like a bird's eye point of view. Okay, so we've got the end panels here and here. Okay, and then we've got this piece that comes out. It's going to slot through a hole that we're going to have, which is represented by these vectors here and here. Well, these ones on the top. And then for this one, you can see we've actually welded those, so you can see that better, how that would actually look. This shape would then slot in on the holes on the bottom. And so we're accounting for the material thickness of the end panels here, so that's going to slot in, and then we're just going to peg those in place. And again, those squares are the same dimension as the one we spoke about here. We've also got some tracks, so we've got 3 rectangles here, so the size of those is, we've got a width of 15 inches and we've got a height of 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to be looking at using different material here for the side panel. So the side panel is the king of the grill, so we're going to have 2 of those. We're also going to have a plain one that's going to sit in the center reservation here, and that's just going to help us keep compartments separate, so that it doesn't really end up a bit of a mess inside of the caddy. Okay, so we're accommodating for that material thickness here, so that is 1/4 of an inch there. And then if we take a look over here, so you'll see I've got a side-on view of what we'd expect to see here. So we've got these panels, okay, so they are essentially going to slot into the actual top and the bottom base of the parts only by 0.15. So we're going to be looking at creating a pocket of 0.15 to create these tracks, so then this piece can just slot in nice and easy there. So that's pretty much it. So in terms of what you need to change, what we'll do is we'll organise all of the vectors into a different sheet, so that you know exactly which vectors you need to alter the layout with. So to do that, we're going to go over to our sheets. Okay, so it's the tab here under the layers tab. At the moment we currently only have one sheet, okay, and I've named this one the layout sheet. Okay, so as I've opened up the file, I've already named that. So you can alter the name by right clicking and using the rename option to give that a name. And to add in a new sheet, we can use the add new option. Okay, and then we're going to call this one layout to edit. Okay, and we'll just ensure that everything is on there that you know that you need to change according to your material thickness. Okay, So we've created that, and you may have noticed that this sheet has been added, and if we just zoom out, you can see it's been added here. And so then we can start copying some of our design over to this sheet over here. So to do that, we're just going to take this one, for example. We're just going to take that, we're going to right click, and we're going to say copy to sheet, layout to edit. You can see it's copied that over there. We're also going to take the handle and the peg, like so, right click, and then we're going to say copy to sheet, layout to edit. And we're going to take these two like so. And then we can just simply right click, and actually even so what we could do is just take one of those as they're identical, and we can then just simply right click it and then say copy to sheet, layout to edit, like so. Okay, so we can then go over to the layout to edit. So to do that, we can double click on the actual sheet itself if we wanted to, and that'll take us to that sheet. Okay, so here we just need to make a few edits here. So we don't need this vector anymore, so we could just go ahead and delete that. We can also delete this one, and we can delete that one. We can delete this one, that one, and this one. And then what we could do is we could delete this part of the design, that part of the design as well. And then on the bottom here, we can kind of keep that as it is. And then we're just going to take these vectors here, like so. And we're just going to right click, and we're going to say move to layer. And we're going to move this one to a layer called change me according to Z. Okay, so this is where you know what you need to change. So everything that is in red is what you need to change according to your material thickness. In which case then we can then go ahead and double up what we need. So we need another one of these, so we'll just press Control and Alt with that selected, and then we could just go in, delete that one, and then we just need 10 lots of those. So we can go and just create some copies there, like so. So we've got 4, and then here we have 8, and then we could just then go ahead and put in 9. Okay, so sorry, 10. So here we have the 10 pegs that we need as well. So what you need to do is you need to change all of the areas in red according to your material thickness for the overall caddy. You'll notice that I've only copied over one of these, and that's purely because you may as well make edits to this one and then copy that over and then just delete these out, as you do not need them for the bottom piece. Okay, so just going over this panel. Okay, so what you need to do is you want to make sure your material thickness accommodates the side or the end pieces. So this barbecue piece, that's going to go in there, so you want to make sure that you account for that. Then obviously your peg holes as well, and then the tracks for the king of the grill, or the side panels that we've got there. And that's pretty much it. You also want to check your pegs as well. So if your material thickness is larger or smaller than the example that we're using, you probably want to alter the peg width as well. So you can just do that by using node edit mode to just decrease it or increase the pegs. Okay then, so we'll just press F just to fit that to our screen. So let's say, for instance, the material thickness that you are working with for the overall caddy was 0.3. We've got a nice quick way of changing this. So let's just take all of these slots, for example. So we could take those like so, and then we could go into the drawing tab and we can use the set selected object size tool. Okay, and so here we have the option to scale items individually, and when we click on that, what it does is it scales them from an individual basis as opposed to as a kind of a selection, which is perfect for slot together projects just like this one. So for example, we could say, well, actually we want the width still to remain at 1 inch, so we're going to uncheck link XY, but then I could say, well, actually my material thickness is 0.3, and so we could put 0.3 in there. And then if we go ahead and press apply, you'll see that it changes those and it adjusts those for you, which is perfect. Nice, super quick way of doing that. Alternatively, you can do that by percentage as well. Okay, so we're just going to undo that. Okay, so just press undo, take it back to 3/8 of an inch, and then we'll just close out there. Okay, so now that we know all of the elements that we need to change to work with our material thickness, and we've got pretty much everything drawn out, we can now start thinking about the materials that we're going to use to cut various elements of the caddy itself. So the barbecue text that we've got here, we're actually going to cut that out of a sheet of masonite. So we're going to look at creating a new sheet again. So we're going to go over to our Sheets tab here. We're going to use this Add New option. You can see automatically it's created that sheet based on the last set of settings. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're just going to call this one Masonite. And then we can come out here. Okay, so we can take the masonite and we can use the edit option here, and this is where we can edit the actual sheet size for this particular sheet alone. So here the masonite that we're using is actually 12 inches by 12 inches by 1/8 of an inch, so we can put those values in there. And then we can specify the Z0 position, the XY datum position according to this particular sheet, in which case I still want to do that off the Z0 off the material surface, and I still want the XY 0 position in the lower left hand corner. So you could go ahead and press OK, and you'll see it's now updated that. It's also updated that job size here, and if we kind of zoom out, you can see that compared to the other sheets that we've got in there. Now whilst we're in our sheets list, we may as well add in another sheet. Okay, so we're going to add new, and here we're going to call this one side panels, and again what we can do, if we just double click on that, that highlights that, but we can go onto the edit option here, and then we can go in and we can give that the actual dimension. So in this case we are using Baltic birch plywood again, however we're just working with a different material thickness, and so the width that we've got is 20, height is 20, except the material thickness this time is actually 1/4 of an inch, and again we'll just go with the same settings here, and we could go ahead and press OK, and again if we zoom out we can see what we've got there. Okay, so we've got those two set up already, so I'm happy with that. So then what we can do is we can just double click on our layout to edit. Let's just take this, and we'll take this one as well. We're going to say copy to sheet. We're going to send that to the masonite sheet, and then if we take a look, we can see what it does. So it positions it according to where the original vectors were relative to its 0 position, okay, which is why it's kind of extended out this boundary here. So we actually need to put that on our sheet. So if we double click on the masonite, we can then take that, we can move that into position, take this one, move this one into position, and you'll see that boundary is now gone because we're in the confinements of our actual sheet size that we've specified here. And so here we're pretty much ready for us to create an inlay toolpath with the masonite for the barbecue text. Okay, so let's have a look at the side panel. So if we just jump back into the layout, and then if we just take that, I'm going to right click, I'm going to say copy to sheet, side panels, and again you can see it's positioned that up there, again relative to exactly where it was previously. So we're just going to take that and we're just going to move that over into position like so, something like that. And then actually I might want to consider looking at spacing out the text a little bit more. So what we could do is we could take the text and we could go over into the drawing tab where we could look at kerning it or editing the text spacing. And so if we click on that, that enables us to alter the spacing between individual characters. And so we can edit the spacing of the characters on an individual basis between each one of those letters just by clicking, or we could look at editing the spacing of the characters for the actual whole line, which is a much quicker way of doing this. And this is an improvement that we've had for version 11. And so to do that, we simply press the Alt key followed by the Shift key just to space them outwards, and we can just simply click 1 and 2. I think that's enough space in there, so then we can just come out like so. We're using the normal selection mode. We can take our text, shift and select our side panel, and then we'll just align it to the center there. And so here we have King of the Grill, in which case we just need a copy of that. So we've got one side panel for one side and one for another, and then we need a third, which is just a plain one that's going to be the divider that's going to sit in the middle of our caddy, which is going to go along these tracks in the middle here. Okay, so moving on again with the design, you can see that I've created a sheet here for the Baltic plywood. And so if we double click on that, we can see what that looks like. And this is the kind of final design here based on the thickness of our material and all of the parts that we need. And you'll notice that the slots all have these dog bone fillets on. Okay, so that's just to ensure that the round tool can actually get in to those corners. So if you've never used the fillet tool before, so that's just accessed here. So use the fillet tool and then select the radius of the tool that you plan to use, in which case we could say if we're using a 1/4 inch tool to cut something out, we'd put in the radius of 1/8 of an inch. We'd select the dog bone fillet, and then you can simply just click in place on the corners and it will create those fillets for you. So I've left those in red as well, so that you know that you need to alter the fillets there according to your material thickness as well, just as another reminder. Now, if you've watched any of my projects before where we talk about slot together parts, you'll know that I'm an advocate for creating test cuts beforehand. So I've created a little test area here to cut the key elements of the part. Okay, so you've got the main slot, which is these slots here. You've got the actual handle or the parts that are going to be coming through the slots to slot into, along with the actual square. So remember these squares here. Okay, so those are for your peg holes and a peg as well. So we can then test that this part slots into here and then that peg slots into the actual square as well to kind of lock that in place. So it's always good practice to do that. And once you've done your test, then you can move on to the rest of the elements to cut out. So at this stage, we're pretty much ready to go and think about our toolpaths. So we've got 3 sheets to machine. We've got the plywood, the side panels, and we've got the masonite.
Hi Becky, quick tech tip for you. We found that anytime you're working with inlays, it's always a good idea to start by cutting your male portion first. This way, you can cut your female piece out and leave it mounted to the machine. Come back and do a test fit of your pieces. And if you find you need to make any adjustments to the female piece, you can simply go back to the software and make those adjustments. This just helps us ensure we have a nice snug fit of our inlays.
Excellent top tip there from Austin. So let's double click on the masonite and then we can switch over to the toolpaths tab. Okay, so I've already put the toolpaths in here, so we're just going to quickly go over them. So here we've got the male inlay. You can see that we are on the masonite sheet, so that's pretty handy for us to know about that as well. And as always, you should check over your material setup, ensuring that the settings are safe and appropriate for your particular use. In which case, we've got a thickness of 1/8 of an inch. We're setting the XY in the lower left, the Z0 on the material surface, and then we've got various clearance and plunge settings that is safe for our setup. So here we could just go ahead and press cancel. Okay, so if we double click on the male inlay, let's just zoom in over here. We can take a look at what we've got. So we're doing the male inlay, the insert part here. Okay, so the cut depth, we're just going to cut a little bit extra past our material just to ensure that we cut all the way through here. Okay, so the tool that we are using is a 1/16 inch 2-flute straight plunge bit. Okay, and that's going to cut that into passes. We're also adding tabs to this just to hold everything in place, and then you can simply go ahead and press calculate, but we've already calculated that, so we're just going to go ahead and we're going to preview it. So let's just go ahead and pick a material that better represents our masonite. So we could go in here and we could look at using a different material. Now in this case, we're going to just go and pick a solid colour here. So we're going to say use solid colour, and we're just going to go with black. Okay, so it's quite a dark colour there. So here we could go ahead and preview that, and that's what that part is going to look like. Okay, so we can simply close out there, and that is the masonite done. We'd then go ahead and save our toolpaths and send that over to our machine. Okay, so next up we can go ahead and if we just go to our 2D view, we can now think about the side panels. So let's just double click on the side panels there. Okay, so you can see as well, we are on the side panels. I can also switch between sheets by using this drop down list. Okay, so we've got two toolpaths here. We've got a V-carve toolpath, so we're just V-carving the text there, and the tool we're using there is a 90-degree V-bit, and then we're just using a profile toolpath to actually cut out our parts. And so for the profile toolpath, if we just jump in, we can see we're just cutting down a little bit further, and we're using an 1/8 inch down cut tool where we're going to machine on the outside. We're also going to look at adding in tabs to hold that part in place. And so again, let's go ahead and preview this. Okay, so again, let's just go in here. We're just going to set this to Canadian maple. Okay, so that kind of looks like the plywood that we're using. And then we're just going to go ahead and we'll just select the V-carve toolpath first. That's looking good. And then the profile toolpath, we'll preview that, and we can see those there. So it's all good, looks great in the preview. And again, we could simply go ahead and just save those toolpaths out. Okay, so next up, let's just go and switch over to our Baltic plywood. Okay, so here we can see we've got lots of different toolpaths there. So if we go over to our 2D view, and we can see the vectors that we've got here. So let's just run through the toolpath. So here we've got a pocket test with an allowance of -0.02. So let's just double click on that. So we're looking at the test area here. So you should do your test cuts first just to ensure that the settings that you use for your slots are correct, or they just work nicely, they fit nicely, rather than you just going into the deep end and just cutting everything as you think it should be. At least once you've kind of fine-tuned the settings for your test pieces, you know then that everything's going to fit in nicely. So what we're talking about here, so we're talking about this pocket allowance. So we're just doing a pocket cut here, so we're just cutting through the holes here. Okay, so we're cutting all the way through the material using an 1/8 inch down cut tool, and we're going with a pocket allowance of -0.02, so it's going to overcut by that amount. So if we just switch to the solid view, you can see how much that is overcutting by, judging by that purple area here. It's going past that vector. Okay, so if we didn't apply a negative allowance here, then we might find that the when the two parts come together, so when this part slots into this slot here, it could be that it's that tight that it actually doesn't even fit together. Okay, so that's why we use a negative value here to overcut there. And so that's really the value that we're wanting to test. From past experience, this value's always worked for me. However, it all does depend on the material you're using and the tools that you're using as well. So it's always good just to do test cuts and then alter or fine tune this value to a suitable fitness that you find when you cut that out. Okay, so it's just simple as that. We're cutting down 0.377 with an allowance there. So if we go ahead and preview that. Okay, so again, let's just change this. So we'll just go to the Canadian maple. Okay, so that's probably the closest that looks like that. So there we can go ahead and preview that. Okay, so that's what that will look like. And then if we just go ahead and tile our windows. So next up, we just zoom in over here. So next up, we've got the profile cutout test. So we're actually just cutting all of our test pieces out. So if we just double click to go in there. Okay, so again, same depth, so we're cutting all the way through using that same tool, and that's pretty much it. So we're just going to calculate that. We've got some tabs in there as well, and if we preview that, we can preview what that looks like. So that's what that will look like. And then that's pretty much our test done. So I would go ahead and machine that. So Austin's going to do that also, just to ensure that these settings are correct for him. And so once you're happy with your test and you're happy with the values there, then you can move on to all of the other elements for our BBQ Caddy design. So we can start with the V-carve crown. So as that's using a V-bit tool, we may as well just get that one out the way. So double click on that. We're using a 90-degree V-bit there. Start depth of 0, where we're going to set that off the material surface, and then that's going to look something like this. Okay, so we're going to just engrave that or even V-carve that crown into the wood there, so we can close out. Okay, so next up we've got the pocket inlay. Okay, so we're looking at the barbecue inlay here. So if we double click on that, okay, so we can take a look at the settings used here. So we're doing the female inlay, the pocket version for this operation here, whereby we're going to use two tools to clear this out. So we're going to use an 1/8 inch tool to begin with to clear the majority of our material away, and then we're going to go in afterwards with a smaller tool, so the 1/16 inch bit, just to tidy up those areas that that larger tool couldn't quite get into. And here we're going to go with an allowance, so we're just going to make that a little bit tighter this time because we want this to have a real snug fit. So we're just going to decrease that to -0.01 in this case. And then if we go ahead and preview that, we can preview it. And so once we've cut that, then what Austin will do is he's going to take the masonite that we've already cut from this sheet here, and then he's going to test the fit here. And if it's too tight, then Austin can come in and edit the allowance here by making it a little bit bigger until it fits in. So top tip with inlays, already mentioned, always machine the male part first, so that then you can go in and test the fit on the female counterpart. Okay, so assuming that's okay, we can move on to the next set of toolpaths. So we've got the pocket slots, that's all of our slot holes. Okay, so again, it's going to be the same as our pocket test, so double click in there. Okay, I'm going with those same settings, exactly the same there, and then we could simply go ahead and just calculate that. And then obviously we have calculated that, and so that's if we go ahead and preview that, that's what that will look like. And then we've got the tracks as well, so we're doing a different one here. So this time we're actually cutting down just 0.15. So going back to the original design, if we take a look over here, so looking at this from a side-on point of view, those side panels are going to slot in here into the top and into the base, okay? And we want them to go in 0.15, okay? So we've measured that there and we've measured that there. That's why we're cutting down 0.15 here, so it fits nice and snug there. Okay, again, we've got an allowance there, and so we'll just close out and let's just go ahead and preview that, and we can take a look there. And then the last toolpath is the profile cutout. So going back to our sheet with that selected, you can see it's all of the outlines there. And then if we double click on that, so it's the same settings we use for our test, assuming that's correct as well. And then you can just check over everything. We've got tabs in there as well. We're using the 1/8 inch tool to cut that down, and then we could go ahead and calculate that and then just simply close out, and then we could go ahead and preview that toolpath to see what that looks like. And so there is all of our finished parts for the Baltic birch sheets there. And so at this stage, we could then save out those toolpaths and then hand everything over to Austin over at Axiom.
Today we'll be using our AR8 Elite along with an Axiom 3-piece inlay set and our 2-piece starter set. We have our Baltic birch and masonite already cut to size and ready to be mounted to the machine. If you have an Axiom, remember, before getting started, it's always important to make sure your machine is honed. We're going to get started by cutting out our mail letters for the inlay. This will be out of our masonite. After we have secured our material down, we can then thread off the collet nut and just be sure our 1/4 inch collet is inserted. Remember, the collet should snap into the collet nut. The first bit that we will be using is the 1/16 inch straight bit from our inlay set. After locking our bit in place, we can jog the machine to the lower left-hand corner and set our origin position. Once the bit is in position, we can press the XY0 button on the controller. This will allow us to set that origin location. On the Elite series machines, the spindle RPM will be displayed on your controller. Pressing the spindle button and the Z plus or minus buttons at the same time will allow you to change the RPM. For this bit, we will be setting our RPM at 24,000. After our flash drive has been inserted, press the File button on the controller. Once it loads, you can select from either the internal memory or the flash drive. Scrolling down to our folder labeled Masonite, we can press the OK button to select our file. After the file has loaded, the B58 controller will display the selected toolpath. When you're ready to run your file, press the Run Pause Delete button on the controller. The work parameters screen will be displayed, and then pressing the OK button on the controller will display a 4-second countdown as your spindle fires up to operating RPM. Now that our letters are done, we can clamp down our 3/8 Baltic to our table. With our 1/16 inch straight bit still inserted in the machine, we can use it to set our origin in the lower left-hand corner. Again, pressing the XY0 button on the controller will allow us to set that as the new origin position. Switching over to our 1/8 inch end mill from the starter set, we will be using this bit to cut out our test piece. Cutting a test piece will allow us to check our clearances and make sure we don't need to make any changes in the software before continuing. So with a quick sand of our test pieces, we can check the fitment, and everything looks like it's going to work just fine. With our 1/8 inch bit still in the spindle, we're going to use it to cut out our larger clearing path for our female inlay. While this file is running, it's a good time to clean up your mail letters and prep them for your test fit. Remember, when doing an inlay, it's always important to cut the mail letters first. This will give you the ability to test fit your pieces while the female piece is still mounted on your machine. Switching back to our 1/16 inch straight bit, we will run the finishing pass for our female pocket. This will give us those nice tight corners and our offset. So with everything looking good for our test fit, we can now switch over to a 90-degree V bit and engrave our crown. Be sure to always touch off between bit changes. With one last bit change for this piece, we'll switch back over to our 1/8 inch end mill. We will attach our dust shoe and run our last file. This bit will be used for cutting out all of the pockets and all of our profiles. With this piece now finished, we can remove it from our machine and mount our 1/4 inch Baltic to the table. Once our origins have been set in the lower left hand corner, we can perform our V-carving and our profile cut. With everything cut out and sanded, we can now glue our inlay in place. Now that everything has been finished, we can assemble our grill caddy and use our pins to lock it all in place. Thank you everyone for joining us for this video. We hope you enjoyed it, and also a special thanks to our friends at Vectric.
Well, Austin, that looked like it turned out great. Now, if you want to have a go at creating your own BBQ Caddy, then simply head over to your V&Co account where you can download the project files from there. And if you like this video, then give us a thumbs up, and if you've not yet subscribed to our channel, then please hit that subscribe button for all of the latest updates on the videos that we'll be releasing. So thanks again to Austin at Axiom, thank you for watching, and happy making.